hub,
and spoke. Audio Collective.
You're listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe.
I hook on, I'm literally standing about right here-ish. The pilot's there. I give him a thumbs up telling him I'm ready to go. He lifts up. That rope starts flaking up into the sky. And when it gets to 100 feet or 200 feet, the pilot's got to be centered over the top of me. And then once I'm ready to go, I give him the up signal and we take off. Yeah, I am super, super afraid of heights. If you asked me to stand on top of the hangar and look over, I'd want nothing to do with that. The thought of like having to climb to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, or I've always thought like there's every possibility I could see us having to rescue someone from one of the towers. That, like, what if they had to leave me there? Like, that would totally freak me out. So hopefully it just never happens. So we are at the sheriff's hangar here at the Sonoma County Airport. My name is Sergeant Chris Haas. I am a flight officer for the helicopter, but I'm also the unit supervisor.
Sergeant Haas's helicopter unit is called Henry 1, and it's one of the busiest single aircraft rescue helicopter programs in the country.
I've been doing this for over 18 years now. And you picked a particularly loud day. That whole Bohemian Grove thing's going on this time of year, which is a big boys club, and I guess all the boys are coming in all their jets today, so it's been non-stop traffic today. So I have a pretty unique story. I had zero desire to be a cop as like a kid. Like, you know, sometimes kids talk about how that's all they ever wanted to do. I was indifferent to it. It was nothing that I thought I would want to do. I always was really into aviation. I grew up here in Santa Rosa. A couple months after I turned 16, I was like, well, I want to get a job at the airport. So I drove up to the airport to here, and I drove to every business here one afternoon after school. And every place told me, you're how old? No, we don't, sorry, man. Like, we don't have anything for you.
The last place he stopped was a little flight school where the owner told him he could come and wash airplanes on the weekends. That turned into managing the desk, and he ended up meeting a deputy who was taking flight lessons at the school, who also happened to work part-time on the sheriff's helicopter. Chris went on a ride along with the deputy, and the seed was planted.
I really liked the way he handled himself, him and his partners, kind of the culture I saw at the sheriff's office. They just seemed like decent people. I was like, man, that would be a really good job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a deputy there, but you know, as soon as I can, I'll just work on the helicopter. I was like, that's totally for me. So this is a Bell 407 GXP. It takes about 6 months to outfit the aircraft with all the police equipment, and that's pretty standard for any police helicopters. There's a lot of extra equipment that goes on it.
Henry 1 is green and shiny and looks like a full-size Matchbox model of a helicopter, except that it has a bunch of extra high-tech gear. And also, I should say, Sergeant Chris Haas, he's an upbeat, extremely friendly guy who gives off Pee Wee Soccer League coach vibes much more than law enforcement. Actually, when showing off Henry 1, he's kind of like a proud kid.
So yeah, let's look at it.
Yep, you bet. And yeah, feel free to jump up. Just the cockpit. Typically in a helicopter, the pilot sits on the right side, and then myself, a flight officer, or one of our other flight officers, they sit on that left side. And so that screen you see on the left side is all of what we're using to look at the ground. I mean, yes, there's a lot of windows, but believe it or not, the majority of my job is interfacing with units on the ground. I'm using that stack of radios there in the middle, and I'm talking to police agencies, fire agencies, you know, depending on the type of call that we're on. And then I'm using that camera, which is right below me, just $650,000, but that's essentially allowing me to do my job like hyper efficiently. So everything from plugging in an address or a latitude, longitude for a call that I'm going to, it will tell me where we need to go. It will give the pilot actually an arrow of where we need to go, how fast we're gonna get there. But then it also, in real time, is letting me look on the ground. And so let's say I'm involved in a police pursuit. As I'm tracking the vehicle on the ground, I'm using the camera to do that because it's honestly better than using my eyes out of the window, but also in real time, on the screen, it looks like I'm looking at Google Maps. So overlaid are all the streets, the addresses on the house. So like I said, hyper efficiency. So, I'm not guessing where we are. And so at the same time, it allows me, let's say I do have somebody running for me into backyards. I can tell people on the ground exactly where we need to go. Or, unfortunately, the North Bay here, we deal with a lot of fires. And the sheriff's responsibility during a fire is evacuation. So it's very, very efficient to be able to see where that fire is and then in real time say, here are the addresses that might be affected, that need evacuations or are being affected. I hate to say it, but this day and age, if that thing was broken, it's like my job is half as efficient. We rely on it so much.
Henry One's camera allows Sergeant Haas and his crew to be just as efficient at night in the dark, when a lot of their calls actually take place.
So there's actually 3 lenses on that camera. There's 2 daytime lenses, and then there's a nighttime lens or an IR lens. A day like today where it's super hot, IR, it works okay. It's just picking up that really hot ground though. So a human being at 98 degrees is kind of getting washed out a little bit. It's still good for kind of a thicker canopy type situation. But like at nighttime, especially on a nice, California, North Bay, cold evening, you probably don't want to be running for me because I'm probably going to find you. But on the flip side, if you're lost in the middle of nowhere, I'm also going to find you. Also, what's very cool is that on our camera is an infrared laser. And so I will point my camera, i.e. the laser, which me and my pilot can now see on our goggles. I can zoom in on my camera and then I can in detail see if I'm seeing the right thing. And so, you might be going to this rescue in the middle of the night. And so you see this light source. And the first thing we want to make sure we're doing, especially because nighttime rescue really adds to the complexity and the danger, honestly. And so we want to make sure we know exactly what we're going into. So we use that technology to pinpoint what we're looking at, and now we know we can size up what we need, what gear we might need, and let's be honest, just to make sure that that person actually needs rescuing. And in a couple seconds, we can decide whether or not we're seeing the right target. Another awesome thing for nighttime stuff is that the screen on the very right actually shows in real time as we're flying the terrain that we're coming into. So we're not going to just fly blindly into stuff, but it's a nice backup, and that terrain will actually highlight. If we're green, we're good to go over the top of it. But if we're coming into a valley and we're going to impact, if our trajectory is that we would eventually impact it, it starts turning red. It starts telling us that terrain's coming up. I mean, it is like flying in the future just right now, which is pretty awesome.
To make Henry One even cooler, the whole bottom of the cockpit is clear, allowing the pilot to see any obstacles right below.
Some of the places we land, there's a lot of obstacles, so the pilot needs to be able to essentially see between his feet. And so we work as a crew in that environment to where we land in some very tight spots, and so my door will actually be open, and I'll be looking out, telling them if our tail's clear, and we do that on every single off-field landing. We're always doing that, honestly, for muscle memory. But there are times where if my 2 eyes aren't able to look out and clear something on my side, we're not going to be able to land there because it's just too tight.
By far, the most awesome piece of equipment on Henry One is the vertical long line.
Those hooks on the bottom of the aircraft, that's kind of the bread and butter of our rescue operation. So unlike a lot of helicopters that hoist people, we do something called vertical reference long line. And so the difference between that and, I can explain it till I'm blue in the face and people always go, okay, well, so how do you get back into the aircraft? We don't. It's all static. Everything we do is a static 100 or 200 foot line. So we have to land, we hook up that line to those hooks, the pilot lifts off, and as soon as that rope becomes taut at either 100 feet or 200 feet, depending on what size rope we're doing for different reasons, then we go. We're never brought back in the aircraft. We have to be brought back down to the ground. It's just a different way in doing things. There's really no right or wrong way to rescue someone, in my opinion. If you can save somebody, that's really all that matters. Our rescues, they're all kind of the same. We get the call or we respond to a call, we find our victim on the ground, we make a note of where they are, and then we land, set up the line, and go back to them. We don't really want to be doing a lot of searching while I'm just hanging from the bottom of the helicopter. Having a guy on the bottom of the line for a couple miles into an area or in or out of area, not a big deal, but we like to keep the amount of time that somebody is hanging on the bottom of that helicopter to as minimum a time as possible. Here's my helmet. That's good to have. It's good to have in the aircraft. It's definitely good to have when you're on the bottom of that line, especially pulling someone off a cliff. I've had plenty of rocks knock me in the head, so it's nice to have a nice helmet on. So yeah, we'll move to the back. Before we go inside, we're just going to look outside. Those are our speakers. That's our PA system, so we can talk to people on the ground. You very quickly discover how much you play charades with people. And so oftentimes, whether or not we're telling someone they need to evacuate an area. But what's also great about that is every once in a while you'll get that call, especially, off the coast, of somebody on shore saying, oh, this kite surfer looks like they're in distress. We might get overhead and go, are they? Are they not? Super easy to be like, hey, are you doing okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down. So it allows us to talk to people on the ground very, very easily. It's also a siren. Siren just gets people's attention, and it's kind of just a novelty, to be honest with you. It's kind of cool to have a siren on your helicopter, so.
The Sonoma County Sheriff's Helicopter Unit has been around since the 1960s. But when they started doing rescues in the 1980s, longline was a more robust approach than hoists, particularly for the size helicopter they had. Hoisting, which involves lifting people up into the helicopter, does have the advantage of not needing to find a place to land. But Henry 1 stuck to longline for a couple of reasons. First, longline can lift a lot more weight than hoists, 1,160 pounds with a longline, versus around 450 pounds with a hoist. That can mean the difference between being able to rescue multiple people at once or not. Another reason,
I hate to say this, we just do longline so well here and have been doing it so long, and it fits our needs so well. You didn't realize you'd be coming to like a mini air show.
in addition to the pilot being able to look through the bottom of the helicopter, during longline rescues, the doors of the helicopter are removed.
He or she actually needs to be looking out of the aircraft. So the difference, again, I'm just going to highlight between us and hoisting. Hoisting requires a hoist operator. So someone in the back has to operate that hoist. Well, not only are they operating the hoist, they're also telling the pilot, go forward, go back, go left, go right. We don't do that. The pilot is responsible for all that. Yes, I might be giving the pilot hand signals or signals on the radio, but he's essentially taking the work of what would typically be a second person on the aircraft, and now the pilot is doing that all themselves.
Because of the way the longline works, Sergeant Haas and others who execute rescues are literally dangling below the helicopter, often in the dark, in very perilous situations.
And my life is 100% in the pilot's hands. So if he accidentally hits something, which luckily there's lots of redundancy, including the 2 hooks you see, he can just drop me from the bottom of the helicopter. Obviously, by design, he has to have a way to release the load from the helicopter. In a catastrophic type incident to where we lost our engine, our policy says that at a survivable distance, he should be releasing me from the line. If we have a catastrophic incident, probably the best thing that could happen is that's my last day here, because nothing's going to be pretty about that.
Back in the late 1970s, early 80s, there were a couple of helicopter crashes, and the sheriff's office tragically lost several aircrew. At that time, the rescue helicopter was piloted by deputy pilots. Things are different now.
Everybody up here, the guys and gals that work up here, lots of different backgrounds. Our pilots are not cops. Our paramedics are not cops. We have lots of disciplines. There's a reason behind that here. Nothing against agencies that use cop pilots at all. But for what we found, for what the terrain that we have here and the environments we fly in with the fog, the weather, we need to have pilots that have an entire career of aviation behind them, and now they're going to do this job. Same with our paramedics. We don't always carry paramedics. When we can, that's great, but we have a pool of part-time paramedics, and they're firefighters from all over the Bay Area, and so we hire the cream of the crop there, and then we take the cops, that the deputies from our agency that we bring up here, in my opinion, are really strong deputies that have a solid background. So what's I think is cool is you almost have this all-star team, in my opinion, of every discipline is kind of the best in their field, and we all go out together and then we work together. And that's why this unit, we are a family up here. It's a small unit, but at the same token, the risk factors are so up there that we have to have trust in each other. And we are a very, very busy program. We average about 1,000 calls a year, 300 or so rescues a year.
In addition to rescues, the Henry 1 crew does patrols and searches, as well as scoping out wildfires in advance of CAL FIRE going in. Their nighttime equipment allows them to assess a fire on the ground with incredible precision.
CAL FIRE is getting a better ability now with night ops. They have contracted airplanes, but that's once an incident is well underway. And having that ability in the middle of the night to be able to launch the aircraft with our cameras to size up a fire. What's amazing about our camera system is I can literally trace a fire tell you exactly what the acreage is. I can tell you the rate of spread when I remap it. So it's just wildly impactful.
No matter what Henry 1 is going out for, it's always equipped with everything needed to rescue or tend to someone in distress.
Anything that you need for any rescue is on the aircraft. So there's never a time where it's like, oh shoot, we're out on air patrol, because we do fly a fair amount of air patrol during the day. There's never a time where it's like, oh shoot, we got this rescue that just came out. We need to go back to the hangar and get something. Everything is on board the aircraft, so it's super versatile. I hate to say it, it's always that identifying where your victim is. So yeah, when you look in the back here, it's all of our rescue gear. Everything has a reason for where it is. So 100-foot line is like our bread and butter. It has a buoy on it, 6 feet from the bottom. That gives me some play when I'm in the water to be able to swim around and not just have rope just everywhere. So the pilot's trained to actually put me in the water and essentially lower the helicopter enough to basically have that buoy submerged, but the rest of the line essentially pretty tight, so that when I give them my up signal, because everything we do in the water is hand signal, we don't have a radio when we're in the water. As soon as I get my victim in the water, we use what we call a horse collar device. It's essentially a strap that goes around the person underneath their armpits. It's about as caveman and simple as you can do, but it's what you use for people that need to be like, that's life and death stuff. That's on the side of the cliff, that's in the water. And then I've got something called a hot seat. It almost looks like a big jacket hammock.
Among all the incredible things that the Henry 1 unit does, it's what they can do at night that makes them truly unique.
Flying at night's a blast. It's an absolute blast. I mean, night long line is absolutely like that's the coolest thing that we do. I say coolest, it comes with a huge amount of training and responsibility. It's nothing that we take lightly, but the uniqueness of it, the fact that no one else really does it, it's just such a tremendous ability to have. And so that's kind of what makes us such a regional asset is once the sun goes down, kind of Bay Area wide, if something's really bad and helicopter rescue is the only way they're going to get a person out of a position, we will end up going to those calls because we're the only ones that can do it. Actually, we're the only agency in the country that does nighttime long line. Some people think it's a little crazy that we do it. There's a reason we do it. Nighttime long line, it's just, that's where the skill of our pilots is absolutely necessary. You know, we have to have the absolute cream of the crop, the best of the best daytime pilots, and then doing that at night. But again, it comes into the amount of training we have to do and continuous training. It's not just we do it once and then say, we're good to go. We're training nights constantly.
They're training nights constantly so that they're ready for situations like this one.
By far, kind of the most dramatic rescue I've done and nerve-wracking. So we were at this hangar. It was during the 2020 lightning complex fires. So we had the Walbridge fire going on in Sonoma County. Napa had all those fires going on. Obviously, they had some fires in Marin as well. They had the Woodbridge fire going on in Marin. There were all those lightning strikes that had occurred with the dry lightning that summer. We were kind of wrapping up the Walbridge fire here. When I keep pointing, it was because it was affecting that ridge line that we're seeing right out the window.
During firefighting campaigns, Henry 1 sometimes helps to size up a situation from the air and does initial evacuations. But for the most part, CAL FIRE is responsible for the rescues.
That being said, CAL FIRE doesn't do rescues kind of like we do them, and they don't do them at night. So we were at the hangar one night, and Marin County Fire's dispatch calls the hangar directly. I can hear the panic in the dispatcher's voice. And she says, Henry 1 available? And I said, we are. And she said, okay, we have 2 firefighters trapped. They're at the head of the Woodward fire, so that means the front of it, and we need a long line rescue. They were able to give us like a latitude, longitude of where they thought the firefighters were. So I plugged that into our computer. We started down that way.
For every call, the Henry 1 crew knows that they'll have to size up the situation and assess for themselves if they'll be able to execute a rescue. That's extra challenging at night.
Because, you know, honestly, you don't see everything. You just see this, and that's almost what makes it more concerning. You just see this black abyss. And so knowing that now you're currently in the safety and comfort of a helicopter, but that you're about to be dangling 100 feet below it into that abyss, that's a really unnerving feeling. So when me and my pilot got overhead, we could see the fire is obviously quite massive at this point. And so it's nighttime, and I just remember I had my goggles flipped up, so I'm not on NVGs, I'm just on looking outside, because obviously the fire is so intense. And I just remember looking at where the fire is and then seeing 2 dots of flashlights, and the fire is right on top of them. And I instantly was like, oh my God, you kind of just hope that the information they gave you is kind of wrong. Like you hope, okay, that's the general area, but actually they're like 2 miles away, whatever. No, they were like 75 yards away from the front of this fire, and we're just getting beat up by the winds because the fire typically creates its own weather at the front of the fire. So it was as reported, and it was honestly worse than reported. And so my pilot and I briefed it, and he was a pilot that I'd worked with for my entire career up here, and he very experienced. And I remember he goes, I can give this like 1 shot, and I'm not even convinced we can actually get in there. And he goes, are you comfortable with that? And I was like, 100%, man. Like I had this bad feeling that I knew we could probably get to them. My concern was, based on the winds, was he going to be able to remain in a hover over me as I was rescuing these firefighters? And how gingerly would he be able to get me into that spot? Would he just have to essentially bulldoze me in there? I mean, it's pitch black. They're on a ridge. It's just, so I'm like, yeah, I'm and I'm not to be some martyr, but it was like, yeah, maybe I'll break my ankle or my leg or something. I know this is probably not going to be super pretty, but if we can just get them in the rescue devices and get them out of here, then that's what we do, and that saves their life, and who cares?
The wind wasn't the only problem for Sergeant Haas and his pilot.
They had just gotten in a bad spot. What I thought was like scrub brush was actually large canopies of trees. It's in the middle of a forest. It was just a very inhospitable looking area. Clumps and clumps of trees. There were no meadows. Hence why it's just burning out of control, because they can't get to it. It's just in the middle of kind of nowhere. And so we now needed to find a place to land to kind of set up the line. Well, I can tell you, there was nowhere to land near them. So we landed on a bluff near the ocean. It took 4 or 5 minutes to fly to where they were. I mean, so we're miles away. I'm on the bottom of a helicopter. It's nighttime. The thing that was concerning to me too was when we initially took off and I was on the ground waiting to be lifted into the air, the pilot has to center himself over me in order to pull me off the ground and not have me swing. And I could tell as he was lifting and the line was getting tighter and tighter, he wasn't centering over me. And not because this pilot doesn't know what he's doing. I knew he was battling the winds, and so when he finally gets me off the ground, I was not centered under the helicopter. And I remember swinging, and I had a clear path, but I thought, if Paul is having this much difficulty getting me off the ground, I can only imagine, because this guy's the best of the best, I can only imagine what's going on up there. And so that was a little unnerving of like, here we go. Like, again, I'm going to give it my best shot. And I knew he had the professionalism and maturity. He wasn't going to send me into some suicide mission, nor himself. He is my brother at that point, and I know that he is going to do everything in his power, including making the responsible choice. If it's unflyable, we're going to turn around.
To add to the tension, Henry 1's searchlight had faltered when they'd initially turned it on.
We can't do a night-long line unless all of our lighting equipment works. That light, we might use it to search for people, but what we use that for night-long line is the pilot has to put that on a fixed object on the ground to give them a hover reference. Without that light, he has no hover reference. And if we don't have that light, we just can't do, everything else can be a go. We can't do long line. So in the back of my mind, there was, God, I hope this light doesn't go out again.
With Chris hanging on the bottom of the 100-foot line, they approached the spot where the firefighters were trapped. The sight was daunting.
It's this massive fire, and you can see the winds kind of whipping it. It looked like you were flying into hell.
Even through the noise of the helicopter blades, the roar of the fire was palpable.
I can hear that crack. You can just hear the energy of it. I had absolute butterflies. That was the one call where I had to tell myself as I was setting up the line to calm myself down. I had to say, relax, calm down. Take a deep breath. It feels like you're in one of those dreams where everything you're doing is too slow. So yeah, he flew me to their spot. I'm not a religious person like whatsoever, but it was really bizarre in the sense of I gave him some hand signals to lower him into the spot, a couple little radio calls here and there, and he put me to say he put me into the direct spot like it was any other day, middle of the summer, nice sunny day, is gently on the ground as you could get. It was just, and I'm looking at the fire over, at that point I can see it through the trees above me. And it was just like, now he's done all the work. Now it's my time to do the work. So I've got 2 firefighters there. I know we've got 1 shot to get them out.
They have 1 shot to get them out of the path of the fire, but no guarantee about getting to safety after that.
Someone's drowning in the ocean and I have to be on the line. I'm swimming to them and hooking them up. Of course, I'm trying to time the waves and how I'm going to get them out of there. And there's a lot of logistics going on. But I'm never really that worried about, I know I'm going to get out fine. It's the pressure of getting somebody out with me. That was the first time I felt like if I don't do my job exceptionally well, smoothly but carefully, it's also a matter of my survival too at this point. There's no part of me that thinks, oh, the winds have gotten better and everything's going to be fine. I know that the pilot, he is having to fly that helicopter. I hate to say it, I know he's flying the shit out of the helicopter to make sure it's stable. And so my biggest concern once I was on the ground was I need to be efficient in getting these guys hooked up and get us out of here, because I had this terrible fear that he was essentially going to be like, hey, I can't, I'm out. He's going to have to punch the line off, which means once he punches the line off, I would now be in the exact same predicament as those 2 guys. The only difference is I've now seen how inhospitable it is, and I think they also knew how bad things were, but I really knew how bad things were.
All right, guys, I'm gonna get you out of here, okay? All right.
The younger guy, firefighter, tells the older firefighter, you first, man, because he knew he had kids. I mean, it's actually kind of a tearjerker when you start to talk about it. Not realizing they were going to be going together, but nonetheless.
One of you needs to put this on. It's like a jacket, okay? All right.
So we have what we call a horse collar or a strop, which goes over somebody and they grab their crotch and we get them out. And then I've got something called a hot seat, which is like a big jacket.
Face me. Perfect. Your arms straight up. You need to grab your crotch. Do not let go. You got it. Go. Take them with us,
So I get them both in their devices. I give the pilot the up signal and he pulls us out.
You have posted it, guys? Yeah, fuck. Thank you for coming. Fuck yeah, man.
We kind of all look at the fire, and I remember I just candidly said to him as we're pulling out, I'm like, see how close it is, guys? And the guy just goes, oh, fuck. Yeah, it is. And I remember he said, thank you so much for getting here. And it was like, absolutely. Like, we're going to give it our absolute best shot.
So now the 3 of them are dangling at the bottom of a 100-foot line above a raging forest fire with the wind whipping around them. While still not out of the woods, there was a strange quiet.
Night long line is so weird, and that night was no different. When it's that dark, it's odd because we all know from flying around in an airplane, it's this vast, endless, you see everything, and same with the helicopter. And even when you're on the bottom of the long line in the daytime, you see everything. It is a very surreal experience at nighttime, and with those guys, it was really, you almost feel as if you're locked in a little closet with them with a little light illuminating because it's so dark. And yes, you have some light beaming down from the aircraft and the noise, but it's not as loud as you would think it is. You're not having to scream at each other. It's a very odd sensation. But even though I felt a huge sense of relief when we took off and now we're in flight, I remember it was like this crash back to reality, because what the firefighters couldn't hear is in my helmet, I can hear the pilot talking to me. And the pilot told me, the winds are killing me up here. We can't land where we started. And it was like, oh God, I guess it's not over yet. And it was like, I can't get you there. I'm going to need to put you on the beach. And so I was like, then put me on the effing beach. Now that we're all safe, no reason to go risk that bluff that the winds are doing some crazy stuff. Let's go to somewhere where it's way more wide open. He can make a way more stable approach. Sand is really forgiving. And worst case scenario, put me in the water. We've got time now. Yes, it's not ideal to be just flying around on the bottom of the line, but theoretically, we probably have a couple hours of gas. Not like it's going to take that long, but yeah, find a good spot for us to land. We scored the touchdown. No reason to crash as we're running to the sideline. We did it, so let's just take our time to get on the ground. Fortunately, as we got closer to the beach, he basically comes back on the radio and he says, nope, I'm totally good. I'm going to put you on this road that's on a cliff above the beach. I was like, great. 5, 4, 3, 2, We obviously disconnect them from the line, and it literally was just, we gave each other some bro hugs, and I actually we gave each other some real hugs, and I just told them how happy I was that they were okay.
At that point, Henry 1's rescue mission was complete. The pilot dropped the line and found a spot nearby to land.
Guys, you're okay, man. Definitely, man.
We were on, luckily, like a dirt road, so literally he landed, shut down the aircraft, loaded all our stuff back up, a couple smaller pickup trucks came, and then it's, see you guys later. So yeah, no, it was weird. It was like, at the end of the day, it was like any other rescue. It was just kind of, the makings of it were a bit more intense than what they usually are.
What they usually are is often no picnic. But for Sergeant Chris Haas and his Henry 1 crew, it's all part of the job.
I'd be lying if I said I've never talked to a therapist. I've seen terrible things on patrol as a deputy. You see terrible things in the helicopter. You experience death. Unfortunately, I also have done many, many body recoveries, whether that's people drowned in the ocean that we didn't get there in time. I had a number of drowning victims that I've had to pull out of the ocean. Maybe I even had to work them up for a while doing CPR on them, and they didn't make it. There's a lot of different things that we see that's really negative. And so, of course, it's sad, it's terrible, it's tragedies, but this is what I dreamt of doing at 18 and that I'm now doing at 40. So it is a dream job. It is a job, but my favorite part of this job is flying around in a helicopter is very cool. But there's nothing to me cooler than like the impact you have for good on any call we're on, because people are relieved when they see a helicopter coming overhead, whether it's the cops on the ground, whether it's the firefighters, whether it's that patient, it's a relief. So when we talk about serving our community, it's like, well, I live here and I am helping the community that I'm a part of. Yeah, I think that's, to me, the best part of the job.
You've been listening to Nocturne. I'm Vanessa Lowe. Nocturne is produced by me and was created by myself and Kent Sparling, who also composed the theme music. Find out more about Nocturne at nocturnepodcast.org. I'll post a link to video for the rescue that Sergeant Chris Haas described in the show notes for this episode. It's amazing to see. Nocturne is a proud member of Hub and Spoke Audio Collective. Find out more about all the fantastic shows in Hub and Spoke at hubspokeaudio.org. Till next time, thanks for listening, and be well.
There are a lot of people that get stuck on cliffs. We have a lot of cliff rescues. I think people come here on vacation. It's beautiful here, and so people maybe forget that they're not at Disneyland, and so they end up maybe climbing up somewhere where they shouldn't. But people need to know about our program, and I always like to make a point. We don't charge you anything to rescue you. So if you are in a bad spot and you think, oh man, I might need to be rescued, let's make that call sooner than later, because we would actually rather not do a night rescue. I would much rather do a daytime cliff rescue of you